Hello, welcome to Networking Field Day 14. We are here at the offices of Big Switch Networks. The presentation that you are about to see is attended by a group of invited delegates who represent the best and brightest minds in the networking industry. They will be offering comments, discussion, and their views on the technology of the company that you are about to see. If you'd like more information about this and other events, please go to our website at techfieldday.com or our YouTube channel at youtube.com/techfieldday.
Let me start out first with a big thank you. When we first started doing these NFDs, the NFT community was a lot smaller than it is now. And I think thanks to Tom, thanks to Steven, thanks to Greg, thanks to some of the folks who couldn't be here, but Ethan and John and Jason, some of the folks who were really the early leaders of the NFT community. You know, I think of this community as kind of the independent voice of the high-end engineering talent in our industry. And it was the early leaders in this group that were the first believers in our company and in our products. I look at where we are now and I look at where NFT is now, and I just think you guys should be so proud of what you've built. And as we go forward, the voice that you represent raises the bar in the industry. And without your voice, I think incumbent vendors stop trying. And thanks to your voice, Big Switch has been very, very successful. So thank you for that. I was talking with Greg earlier in the week. There are a lot of new faces here. So we'll go through a bit of context, the why and the how we build our products. And then we'll dive into the demos of our bleeding edge work, of our directional work, the stuff we typically do at NFD. So we started the company with this fundamental belief that it was really the engineering teams in the hyperscale operators who were driving innovation in our industry and not vendors. If imitation is the most sincere form of flattery, well, their engineering teams should be very flattered. Our switching product is an enterprise version of Google's Project Andromeda. Our monitoring fabric is an enterprise version of Microsoft's Project Daemon. We're actually honored we have Rich Groves here, the architect of Microsoft Project Daemon here, is going to be part of one of our presentations. Our security fabric, same type of trend. It was part of one of these big next-gen DMZ projects. And the amount of innovation that these large teams are still generating, this is not stopping. We think of our company, we take open hardware, right, so switching and servers, and we write the software that turns that open hardware into switching fabrics, into monitoring fabrics, into security fabrics. And when we first started the company, we always thought, hey, look, the control plane will always run on servers, and the data plane will always run on switches. But here we are at this point, and the line is actually blurring. We're no longer on 1RU switches. If you look at the work that we just announced, like with the Dell 6100, we're sort of blurring the line there. If you look at the work that we did with our DPDK-based BMF service node, we're starting to put x86 into the data plane itself. And we actually see hardware innovation in the industry in a very exciting spot. When you work with both switching chips and with servers, there's a lot of interesting hardware trends that are going on that we're going to incorporate in our products over time. We write the software that turns these into fabrics, a switching fabric, a monitoring fabric, a security fabric, and we're not stopping. In our product design sessions, there's a whole list there that we have yet to tackle. So we're excited about the road ahead, and we're also very excited about where we are today. And it's thanks to some of the people who are in this room. It's thanks to your voices in the very, very, very early days that I think have made us our company that we are today. Of our sort of group of data center networking startups, we're now the largest. We're about, bookings-wise, we're about 3 times the size of the second largest company out there. Now, we sell most of our products are one-year software subscriptions, but if we had constructed the company like a traditional switching vendor, right now we'd be just about where Arista was in 2011. Given we're all software, we actually have a slightly higher growth rate. So we're very proud of that. It came from 3 really big scary bets that we made as a company. We made a really big culture bet that our process of building products starts with the human experience first. And this is not how most product teams in our industry build their products. They start with a packet, we start with a person, we think about what intent the person had, and how fast can we get somebody from intent to result with as few quirky side effects as possible. So we have a very different kind of product design culture than our competitors. We made a really big product bet of this one big switch metaphor. It's what gives the company its name. You'll hear us refer to that a lot. When you log into the controllers, they feel like you're logging into the soup of a really big chassis. The spine switches act like a backplane. The leaf switches act like line cards. Makes it very intuitive to use. That was a scary engineering bet that took us years to get right, but now it's really paying off. And the third, we made a big portfolio bet, something that was very risky. We did our monitoring product and our switching product at the same time. It's like a startup risk squared. But by having both an introductory product as well as a flagship switching product, I can kind of show the results. That bet was a very, very scary one, and that bet has worked out incredibly well. That's why we are where we are today. I'm most proud, it gets a little bit washed out of the slide, but the user logos where we're deployed now, that's probably the thing that makes me the most proud about this company. In the geographies in which we play, in the verticals in which we play, I'm just very proud that we've been selected by teams that you'd recognize as kind of the really high-end engineering teams that hold us to an incredibly high bar. And that, being able to go above that bar is to me something that makes me very proud about this company that we've built. I mentioned the portfolio. I think one of the reasons why we've been a lot more successful than sort of pure play switching startups is because the vast majority of our end users actually start with our monitoring fabric. There's this, hey, we're starting with SDN, we're starting with hardware software disaggregation, like we're starting with a new vendor, where do we start? And by showing a monitoring fabric that's really designed for network operations, we can just build a lot of trust in this model and build a lot of trust in us as a company and us as an engineering team. So most of our users start with these out-of-band monitoring fabrics. Our newest product, the security fabric, this is starting to prove its way out as, hey, more and more of our users are starting with out-of-band monitoring and then going to the security fabric for DMZ design. So we kind of start with the part of the networking team that's really close to day-to-day operations. We then go to the networking team that's really, really close to the day-to-day security needs. When we think about switching, the first switching projects that we usually do are not data center wide. We think about projects and we think about pods inside of an existing data center. Sometimes it's 2 or 3 racks. But typically these are projects that require very high degrees of network automation. And so this is where we kind of think of our first switching, of kind of our user journey here. The first switching engagement's usually about a specific project. And then with our users, I think you kind of saw on the previous slide, with our users who have been with us for a while, now we're starting to, just now we're really starting to be kind of data center standards, and now we have more and more of these kind of 100-rack and multi-100-rack data center wins, where we're the switching system across every pod and even across the core of the data center network. But that's a long journey to get there. And so we really try to start from humble beginnings, and I think that our kind of view of this journey is why we've been able to grow a lot faster than pure play switching companies or pure play SDN companies out there. So our flagship product, we started with the perspective of, hey, leaf spine fabrics they're either really, really hard to automate or the ones that are out there are really hard to use. And if I could leave you with one thing about our Big Cloud Fabric, is our flagship switching product. It's a leaf spine cloth, but it feels like one big switch. When you log into the controllers, it feels like you're logging into the soup of a very big switch. The spines feel like a backplane. The leaves feel like line cards. And when you're doing architecture work with it, as long as you keep in mind that this fabric acts like one big switch, it doesn't take thousands of pages of design guides. Most architects that have ever built around a big chassis switch kind of just get it right the first time. What you'll see in our demos that we're going to show today is all of the work that we're putting into automation. and integrating this one big switch with other systems that are in the data center. You're going to see integrations with a couple of different VMware products. You're going to see integrations with containers. We have a whole series there, and I think that's, you'll hear that a lot over the course of the next 2 hours. Our introductory product, our monitoring fabric. So if you're familiar with NPBs or with monitoring fabrics, they connect taps and span ports to out-of-band tools. And the problem that Rich and the Microsoft team were facing was, hey, first, these don't scale well when you're talking about scaling from an initial project up to data center scale monitoring. So we said, hey, using switching and server hardware, we can actually build a really clean scale-out monitoring fabric. But then as this evolved over the last couple of years, we noticed, well, any one tool typically sees a fairly small slice of traffic in a data center. This monitoring fabric sees a massively broad swath of traffic while it's taking packets from tap to tool. So we started working more and more on the analytics functions where we could do broad spectrum analytics on the data center traffic at large. And that's actually turned out to be a really big breakthrough for us. It's a really interesting area where we're doubling down. The last, we just announced Big Secure Architecture. So this came from, this is our newest fabric. This came from a next-gen DMZ project, where if you look at a large enterprise DMZ, it's typically a pair of routers with a whole series of security devices around it, a lot of small subnets, a ton of VLANs, a lot of very, very awkward routes, and if you're trying to do interesting business logic, there's a ton of PBR code. So if instead of doing all your service chaining at L3, if you instead start thinking about doing service chaining at L1 and build an entire product around it, let me give you one example. We had one group where across 77 DMZs globally, they were running around 4,000 lines of routing config in each DMZ. That was different per DMZ, and we actually took that down to around 200 lines of config that was the exact same in every single DMZ worldwide. So this is an emerging product. I believe that this is an emerging product category. I think that we're tracking a little bit ahead of the industry right now, and I do think that networking actually needs a fit-for-purpose product specifically for this area. And now when we make these things simple, suddenly the ability to automate them becomes so much easier. And that's what you're going to see in the demo today. Because the number of dependencies that you have on the automation goes down by so much that we can accomplish really interesting use cases in tiny, tiny amounts of code. I hope that you've heard me use the word automation like almost once a minute here. It's because my team hears me harp on this a lot.
All we need is some intent-based, and some orchestration, and some
and then we'll have somebody say buzzword bingo in the corner. Well, the reason I think it's important is because I think it's the third inning of SDN. When I first started doing SDN, it didn't have the term SDN yet. It was just 12 of us in the basement of the Stanford Computer Science building. There was this first challenge of, okay, how do we, kind of get the concepts known out there? There was a second challenge of how do we actually get this stuff to work? But we're now in the third. We always had this idea that, hey, with these centralized controller-based architectures, we could integrate with other software in the data center far more easily than you ever could with traditional networking products that are box by box. And I believe this is actually the new competitive frontier in our part of the industry. If I look at, as a relatively small team, both the breadth as well as, you'll see from the demos, the depth that we can go into with our integrations, I really think that this is the most useful thing that we can do to move the industry forward. And getting it right is very, very tricky. It takes a lot of design time. It also takes a lot of technology assets on both servers and on switches. So I think the Big Switch is very well set up for this third inning here of the industry. As we go forward into this, we think about networking very differently. We think about networking not as a silo, but rather in context of a whole series of other systems that are going in the data center. And I think for all of us in this room as networking professionals, I think this makes now an exciting time to be in networking.
It's been a hell of a journey. One of my pet theories about networking is everything's a decade long. We run on a decadic cycle. And since 2010, we're now 6 years in. So I think my theory is proven that we're now into the the actual momentum building.
Yeah.
Does that seem reasonable to you, that sort of statement?
Absolutely. I mean, I spend a lot of time with our large users, obviously, and kind of in 2010, 11, I mean, we used to get laughed out of the room. Yeah. What are you talking about? And when I see the number of questions that people almost treat now as, like, yes, of course, it's almost rote.
Yep.
That back then were very unproven. I mean, that to me is a really, really exciting just change for where the industry as a whole has gone. I agree 100%. In this 10-year cycle, we're 6 years in.
I think the other thing about Big Switch for me is that you focused on solutions, not trying to build a platform. So some companies have built SDM products that are meant to be like, they've got no use. They're using software to do something, like to just do what we do today. But they don't move the needle. They don't solve a problem. Whereas you have monitoring fabric, the security solution, and then you do the data center switching as well. But so they solve problems. They don't try to say, if you buy this, we'll have something for it later, or we'll partner with 10 other companies to try and add value to our platform, because it's kind of an admission that your platform isn't actually valuable in its own right. Is that? That's one of the things that I like about Big Switch. You're solving a problem. The monitoring fabric, the out-of-band network solution, and the security fabric are all things that I need. The fact that they're SDN is kind of ancillary.
I appreciate that. I think it comes from, when you have end users that are part of your product design process, and when you have people you really trust out there, you can say, look, you're going to use this. Here are 3 different things that we could build. You help us pick which. It steers you away from, there's a lot of stuff we'd love to build, but there's a smaller amount of stuff that people actually really want to use and want to use right now. And I think we've done a lot of work, and it's painful at times, but I think it's absolutely worth it if you bring kind of your closest end users into your decision making.
And it's not about your career decision. So a lot of the times these other SDN products mean throwing away your existing data center and starting again. And you're kind of betting your, certainly a lot of your personal life working through the pain threshold. And I don't want to do that anymore. And so starting small and building in different parts makes far more sense to me as a customer. And instead of saying, wipe the slate clean, let's rebuild it and slide this new, engine in underneath the car that's running, like the data center, let's throw out the entire switching infrastructure and start again. That doesn't make sense. I don't think that's a viable strategy anymore. We can't do retrofit the data center. It's got to be a migration or in pieces.
I agree. And building a company around that was hard.
Yeah.
Building a startup that's going to start life as a 2-product company is really risky and really scary and really hard. But I think it's also, I think it's the only path.
I wanted to ask, just from the way you're presenting the company to the market now, do you feel like the term SDN is a badge that you want to wear, or is it more like an anchor that something that?
It's a good question. We actually had this discussion internally not that long ago. At least for me, I now find myself describing our company as an SDN company, but I don't find myself describing our products as SDN products anymore. It's kind of, we built a switching fabric, a monitoring fabric, we built a security fabric. There's an awful lot about those that I think makes this, look, it is the easiest to use switching fabric in the industry. We happen to use SDN together, but it's pretty ancillary to the product. I think it's core to the company's DNA, and I'm proud of that. But when it comes down to using the products, there are a whole lot of other reasons why I think our products are great.
I just want to say, thank you for taking the time to present to us, because as a white box integrator, this is something I'm really starting to live in my daily life. As we came from this and we did this, and now we're going to this. And all the different white box solutions present so many different ideas. And you guys have a great idea of this disaggregation of your standard chassis switch. As I started to dig into it, so it's really neat to be able to be here and kind of get that firsthand accounting from you guys of this is why we did this, this is how we did this. It's a really great opportunity to hear that.
Oh, I appreciate it.
And I kind of feel like I came home on this, because you're taking the DC technologies and shoehorning them down into enterprise. And I build my whole business around taking networking technologies and repurposing them in places that they don't normally go. So as soon as you brought that up, I'm going, okay, these guys speak to my soul. Let's keep going. I like it.
I appreciate that a lot. it's funny, some of it came from as a guy who was sitting in on the Stanford research team. Like, it was really hard in the early days to kind of make head or tail. Like, it seemed really important, but what is, like, how am I ever going to really use this? And so the idea of like the one big switch metaphor, and then the idea of, hey, taking that to, this isn't switching. We're not using switching hardware to just do switching. We're using switching hardware for all kinds of different things. To me, it's like it was like the core Stanford principle in the very early days, and this to me was kind of that's what gave the company its name. It was the big thing that I think, one of our 3 really big bets that made us what we are.
Yeah. Do you guys ever see yourself going out of the data center? You ever think you headed to other markets or other ideas than the data center? Is that on the radar?
When's the next NFD?
Good one.
How does April look for you?
Let me hand it over. We have some great demos, and we're trying to pack a lot into a very short amount of demo time. So thanks a ton.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.